à tous. Merci de votre participation. Pour écouter notre session en français, veuillez cliquer en bas de votre écran sur l'onglet Interprétation et sélectionner le drapeau français.
Hello, bonjour, habari za leo. My name is Kevin Mutia.
Solofina Nekesa.
Lauren Arnza.
Ryan Fisher, Professional Officer at ICLE Africa. On behalf of ICLE Africa, the African Center for Cities, our future cities, and partners, I'm excited to welcome all of you to the Rise Africa 2021 Action Festival.
Rise Africa has been growing as a platform of thinkers, doers, enablers, committed to inspiring action for sustainable cities.
Rise Africa is about building active networks across academia, government, private sector, civil society, and the arts.
Our entry point is based not on articulating problems followed by proposing solutions, but rather on celebrating our cities as places of innovation and culture, while asking what more we can do to make them sustainable, inclusive, and vibrant.
This festival is hosting 46 sessions over 5 days from across 16 countries in Africa and the world. Every session aims to share new ideas, showcase ongoing actions, and launch new initiatives by bringing participants together to chart a new route forward.
We hope that the festival program will inspire you to commit to one or more specific actions that you or your organizations will take on. As this session closes, you will be redirected to a survey in which you can articulate these actions. We will follow up on this committed action throughout the year and offer resources, connections, and support. In this way, we are testing the idea that events can galvanize action, and we hope that you will join us in this effort.
Beyond this session, there are many ways to take part in the festival.
Register for further sessions.
Vote for your favorites in the photo competition.
Test your knowledge of African cities from our daily quiz.
Watch a variety of inspiring video provocations.
And listen and dance to the Rise Africa 2021 playlist.
We hope that you will make all attempts to reach out to new people and build lasting connections.
Before we begin, it's important to note that this session is being recorded and that by participating, you are consenting to be recorded. All recordings will be available on the program page after the festival.
Creative expression is vital for creating new futures for our cities. So we invite you to enter this session in the spirit of creativity and dreaming.
To my future children, I bequeath this continent, borders lowered and turned into a soft pile of dust, smooth sand under steady feet. Your birthright is a country of flowers, a city that holds you even with your complicated lineage, the way this city has held my heart, held its arms out for all of the lost people who found solace in it. Your heirloom is this land and all its wormholes, portals hidden in plain sight between city skyscrapers, where people from here resemble people from far away places, and differences are muted while life happens. I reimagine you a country that does not cage its doves, a bequest of waters that pool precious histories, mountains that stand guard to protect against the unknown, a nation who preserves compassion over everything else, a mouth that can home many languages, and a spirit that rises above its fears.
Maybe Inge, give me a thumbs up if that was all from your part. Great. Welcome everybody, and welcome to this session on the humanitarian development peace nexus in African cities which have been impacted by rapid urban growth and displacement. We are very much happy to have you join this session. And after the first round of introduction of our speakers, which I'll do straight away, we'll start the session with some introductory notes, then with some country-specific content on the humanitarian peace nexus situation. And then at the end of the session, we will break into breakout rooms. So please be ready to go into breakout rooms. From my side, I'm Stephanie Lewis from UN Habitat. We're hosting this session together with the Mayor's Migration Council, which is represented by Samia Saliba. So maybe Samia, maybe you would like to also add some welcoming words before we advance. We would encourage everybody to please put any sort of questions you have into the chat. We will collect those questions that come during the session for making sure in the question and answer session we can reply to all of them. If you have any specific question to one specific speaker, please be sure to add the name of the speaker so the person knows that he or she will actually be asked to answer the question during the question and answer session. Samir, over to you for a short hello, and then also we will start with 2 poll questions after you said hello, and then we'll go over to the first speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome to all. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to co-host this session on the triple nexus, and specifically as it applies to cities in Africa. I'm here representing mayoral perspectives and city perspectives, along with international perspectives from Human Habitat. So it's great to just be able to show the power of that collaboration, that international local collaboration, which we'll hear a little bit more about during today's session. But thank you for joining. And I hope you find the session informative and fun at the end of the day. Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. So maybe we just kick off this quite interactive session with 2 poll questions. The first poll question, let's see if we have any technical, oh, there it goes. I can already see it. I hope all the participants can see it as well. So have you ever heard of the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus before? At the moment, we have 12 answers. So maybe put your answer in the chat, because I think we do have some more participants. Okay, if not, we'll just take it. And it's good to know that all of you are already aware. That's good. The second question that we have is, if you think globally, the majority of displaced people live in camps. Okay, well, very clear vote. That's very good. So maybe with this short introduction, let me hand over to Angelica. Angelica is the Senior Advisor for the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus in IAM. She's worked for over 25 years with humanitarian development and conflict interventions in Latin America and Africa. And without any further ado, Angelica, over to you. I know you've prepared a presentation. I hope it works.
Thank you very much. I'm trying to share the presentation now, so please let me know if you can see it on your screen. Thumbs up if you can see it. I don't know.
Yes.
Yes. So as Stephanie said, I work at IOM on the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus, and it's a great honor to be here with you today. Following the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016, the Agenda for Humanity was agreed upon by member states in the same year that the Agenda for 2030 was also established. So we see there was a clear commitment by the international community to work together to end poverty, to improve everything around health, education, gender, etc. I'm not going through all the 17 Sustainable Development Goals now, but you can find more information around that on internet. So on the HDPN, there was recommendations agreed upon by the major donor countries. And these donors decided that development aid and all kinds of humanitarian assistance and assistance to peacekeeping should be more coherent, more coordinated, that we should strive for comprehensive programming together, join forces. And there are 11 principles of the OECD recommendations on the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus. And a lot of UN agencies are also adhering to these recommendations. Both UN Habitat and IOM are among the first UN agencies adhering. And thus, we have decided to work more closely together. And also work much more on prevention and preventing poverty, preventing all kinds of vulnerabilities. As the UN and part of the UN reform, we are starting to do more and more analysis, because HDPN is about putting people first. It's about being inclusive. It's about listening to the population and understanding what needs are there. What are the issues that we can assist, we can accompany, the international community can accompany the national efforts. We cannot fix other countries. We are there to support you. And we do that with the new common country analysis that are being rolled out, and also in what they called the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Frameworks, which is the plan on how to work together better as the UN family. I also wanted to flag about vulnerabilities and risk that we always have to remember, and that is part of HDPN, that vulnerabilities are different depending on age, gender, ethnicity. It has different implications when you're younger, when you're older, but there are vulnerabilities we can all fall into during the lifespan. And we need to ensure that we have good systems in place to work on that. Coming around urbanization, because I know this event is a lot about cities, and we also know that cities is the heart of any country. I mean, most capitals are vibrant, there's a lot of people, but unfortunately there's also a lot of displaced people. And there, the HDPN works on joint analysis, and we know that within a city, you can have pockets of extreme poverty, you can have pockets of rich, you can have different problems within the same city. So you need a lot of data collection, and you also need to have local solutions for the local context. What is best for the people in the city where they are living? But some of the issues can be generic, and some of the problems we can also learn from each other. So we know that all cities, from European cities to cities in Africa and around the world, needs greening. We need to have air to breathe. We need less pollution. There needs to be some type of system of taking care of garbage, wash and sanitation, public transport, youth employment, solar energy, health, education, etc. And these are actually pictures. One is from a rooftop Johannesburg garden for food, and the other one is for Burkina Faso, where we're also looking at how to put more emphasis of greening cities, but also providing food and nutrition to the new populations per se. I could talk for 2 hours, but I've only been given 5 minutes, so I'm going to end up by giving an example. And I used to work in an African country. I'm not going to go into all the details, but we had a very interesting project there. It was led by the local authorities. It was enhanced to first look at the area where a lot of displaced people have been put in just a piece of land. There was no infrastructure. There was nothing in this area where people set up huts and started living. And we're talking about a population around 100,000 people with no infrastructure. And very quickly it was seen that there was a need of a health center, both for maternal, for delivering babies, but also for other kind of injuries or health related matters. So ILO provided vocational training to a lot of the young people there to teach them how to become plumbers, electricians, how to build houses, and actually managed to get a lot of them through to start own businesses. At the same time, UNICEF and UNFPA equipped the clinic, and they were also doing a youth center where they continued doing activities for the community. UNDP put in solar energy that would also lead to pumps that help the water and sanitation. At the first stop, it was only providing the clinic and the youth center, but they later also started to work on providing water for the whole community as such. UN Habitat was also working very much on the planning, on lighting, I could go on and on and on, but you see that the purpose here is to see that all the UN agencies came together with what their mandate actually asked them to do. And together they also worked with the World Bank to see if there's any possibility around land tenure and ensuring that people also had birth certificates, IDs, etc. But I think the point of this project, why it was so successful, is that the mayor and the local authorities led the development, and that people in the city or in this area of a suburb to the city was actually asked and participated in the planning. So that is one example of a successful humanitarian development piece. By also working in this community, you worked against gender-based violence, working on conflict prevention, etc., etc. So there were cholera outbreaks and other emergency support that then was enhanced by the fact that there was a clinic, etc. So the development actually had bearing for the humanitarian actors and also worked on peace and conflict resolution. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Angelica. And I think actually you chose a very nice project, and thank you also for introducing the overall global frameworks of the humanitarian development peace nexus. And of course, making the reference to the SDGs. I think what you mentioned, there are 2 points which are very close to, of course, to my heart as UN Habitat. First of all, that you said that the project was actually led by local authorities. I think that is something that is really very, very important also for advancing the nexus. And also with your second example, you showed that it needs a cross-sectoral response. That means that we have to all start thinking across across the administrative, but also the box boundaries that we all have based on our mandates, and try to find solutions which are actually integrated. And I think specifically in the urban contexts, that is something that is very much needed. Before I hand over to Samir now, we would like to have another interactive exercise, which is a word cloud. So as Owen just put in the chat, please, everybody, go to the Menti page, which is now visible in the chat, and use the code which is given, which is 555492. Let me give you a second to actually enter. I don't know, maybe someone can give me an indication if everybody had enough time to answer.
Well, mine are up there, Stephanie, so maybe we give people a couple more minutes. There we go.
Okay, thanks. Okay, can we, yeah, so I can see the word cloud is actually filling. Let's give it another minute so that people can add. Okay, maybe we stop here. So I think we do have quite a nice word cloud here. It actually puts coordination in the middle. And I think that is obviously, it shows that a lot of people who are participating in this session actually do know what we're talking about here, which is very nice to see. So thanks a lot. We'll keep this in mind when advancing. And maybe now let me hand over to Sama Saliba, who's the head of practices at the Mayor's Migration Council. Maybe you can provide some inside views from the majoral perspective, from the city's perspective. Over to you, Sama.
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks everyone for participating in that. It was great to see collaboration and coordination really central to people's thinking on the humanitarian development peace nexus. But I think it's also always important to keep in mind that coordination and collaboration is sometimes best led by local actors. Right? So sometimes it's great to have collaboration, but who's driving it, who's leading it, and who's really focused on the outcomes after the fact. So that's sort of the introduction to my intervention. As Stephanie mentioned, I'm Sam Rasleeb. I'm the head of practice at the Mayor's Migration Council. And for those who are unfamiliar with the Mayor's Migration Council, we are a mayor-led advisory organization that helps cities shape national and international policy and practice on migration and displacement. And our mission is to ensure that global responses both reflect and address the realities on the ground for the benefit of newcomers and the communities that receive them. And at the Mayor's Migration Council, we believe that cities cannot truly be inclusive until everyone, regardless of migration status, has access to basic services and can meet their own immediate needs, has access to opportunities to improve their lives, that of their families, and that of their communities, and lastly, feel safe in their homes and then in their communities. And at its core, this is really what the humanitarian development peace nexus means to us and to local governments. And our mission is to elevate city governments and local leaders as ideal actors to collaborate, a word that we all elevated in the Mentee, with other actors to achieve the core tenets of the Nexus. I mean, we all know the quiz sort of stole some of my thunder, but we know that the majority of displaced people, both refugees and internally displaced, don't live in camps, but in cities. But at the same time, while forced displacement is higher than it's ever been before, the UN Migration Agency estimates that by 2050, between 25 million and 1 billion people could be moving within their countries or across borders for climate-related reasons. And the majority of these journeys will lead to cities, and many of them, if not the majority, will take place on the African continent, driving growth and marginality specifically within African cities. And so whether we are talking about humanitarian development or peace building challenges, local leaders are and will increasingly be at the forefront of our collective response, of our collaborative response, especially African leaders. You can take cities such as Maiduguri in Borno State, Nigeria, where I hope our colleagues have managed to join, which is a city that has nearly doubled in population due to increases in conflict and climate change. Angelica gave a great example of collaboration within an African country. Unfortunately, within Maiduguri, at least from my experience, the response has been piecemeal, from humanitarian actors delivering humanitarian interventions, development actors delivering development interventions, and peace-building actors delivering peace-building interventions, all within the same city, to the same communities, and often with minimal engagement with actors such as those within Borno State government or the Maiduguri Metropolitan Council. And at the Mayor's Migration Council, our role is to really push back against this, to elevate local and city leaders as agents of collaboration and coordination, very capable of taking inclusive and immediate humanitarian action in the short term, and planning ahead for improved development, social cohesion, peace building in the long term. One example is a project in Freetown, Sierra Leone, funded by the Mayor's Migration Council through our Global Cities Fund for Inclusive Pandemic Response, which I'll put in the chat in a moment. Led by Mayor Yvonne Aki-Sawyer and her fantastic team in the Mayor's Delivery Unit, Freetown's dual entrepreneurship and waste management project provides employment to migrant youth, and in doing so, helps them improve sanitation and public health of their communities. So really a human and includes collaboration between migrant youth and Freetonian youth who were living in the city beforehand. So really a simple project that creates teams of waste management entrepreneurs, providing a public good in low-income informal settlements, providing livelihoods to those entrepreneurs, and building social cohesion between them. A very simple example of how cities can view migrants, displaced, and marginalized people as an opportunity to contribute to the Nexus. Just to close, if I were to put it simply, the humanitarian development peace building Nexus requires multitasking. And to put it simply, city governments are great at multitasking. it's in their very nature to manage complexity, to serve diverse communities of different backgrounds, to work collaboratively with myriad actors from the private sector, civil society, public, national and regional governments, et cetera, and to deliver accountable whole of city solutions that ensure that everyone within the city, again, has access to basic services and can meet their own immediate needs, has access to opportunities to improve their lives and feel safe in their communities. We need to put city governments in the lead position in implementing the Nexus. So if you're a humanitarian development or peace building practitioner, it really takes reaching out to them and offering your support, seeing what plans or unfunded priorities they have, which you can contribute to, and figuring out how you can help. You'll hear firsthand from others on this panel about the importance of local and regional governments in implementing the Nexus. So I'm going to stop talking so we can get as quickly as possible to them and hear what they have to say, so you don't have to take my word for it. But thank you all for being here, and I appreciate your participation and your input.
Thank you very much, Samir, and that is very much appreciated. And I think what you just mentioned is very important, that in the end, the access to services in cities is among the bases that, among the social contract actually between governments and their populations. So helping to increase the access of all parts of the population, migrants, but also other people in vulnerable situations who do not have access actually to those services, is also, of course, a very strong peace building, occasion, because it rebuilds trust in government authorities. And also, as you just described for Freetown, I think it's very interesting that you said by having those joint activities actually around the waste management, that, people who might not have met otherwise are actually going to grow together as a team, and that really strengthens some social cohesion. So thank you very much. And I think very, very interesting contributions already at this very early stage. As you said, we're now going to hand over to speakers from 3 different country contexts. So first of all, I would like to introduce my UN Habitat colleagues in Burkina Faso, Mr. Yombio Dogo, who will actually speak about a project which is implementing the humanitarian development peace nexus in 4 cities in Burkina Faso. So let me just try to share my screen, and then Yombi will speak about the project in French, and then I hope the translation also works. Let me just share my screen so that...
Je l'espère bien aussi. Bonjour à tout le monde. En attendant que Stéphanie arrive à partager son écran, on a les moyens logistiques ici aussi souvent font défaut en termes de connexion Internet. Mais bon, qu'à cela ne tienne, comme nous sommes en train de parler du Nexus, c'est exactement dans la même approche, dans la même dynamique que nous sommes en train de mettre en œuvre un projet d'appui à la résilience des collectivités territoriales impactées par les déplacements des populations. Comme chacun, vous le savez, le Burkina est un peu à la une de l'actualité mondiale par rapport au déplacement des populations suite à la crise humanitaire, la crise sécuritaire qui a fait plus de 1 million de déplacés. Et les 1 million de déplacés se concentrent essentiellement dans la région du centre-nord et du Sahel. Et nous, ONU Habitat, en tant qu'ONU Habitat, nous avons bénéficié d'un appui de la Commission européenne pour mettre en œuvre un projet axé sur le Nexus, l'approche Nexus, c'est-à-dire que voir comment on peut renforcer la résilience des collectivités territoriales, en même temps accroître aussi l'accès des PDI, des populations déplacées internes et les réfugiés aussi aux services sociaux de base dans les villes moyennes ou les villes secondaires, et voir aussi comment on peut réduire aussi l'impact de ces déplacements des populations en termes environnementaux aussi et au niveau de ces villes. Donc, c'est un projet, comme je le disais, un projet d'appui à la résilience des collectivités territoriales, mettre les collectivités territoriales au centre de la recherche de solutions durables pour les PDI. Et comme on le sait, les populations déplacées, quand ils viennent à l'échelle d'une ville, elles s'établissent de manière durablement Et aujourd'hui, quand on prend les villes dans lesquelles nous intervenons, c'est les villes de Kaya au centre-nord, les villes de Kaya, de Tougouri et de Kongoussi. Et dans le Sahel aussi, c'est la ville de Dori essentiellement. Et dans ces villes, les populations sont installées un peu sur le tissu urbain, dans des établissements informels où elles ont difficilement accès à l'eau potable, à l'assainissement et même à des conditions de vie un peu difficiles. Avec l'appui de la communauté humanitaire, il y a eu des réponses urgentes. Mais aujourd'hui, avec la durée de la crise, ça fait maintenant 5 à 6 ans qu'on vit cette crise-là, les populations se sont installées. Comment faire en sorte que nous ayons une approche beaucoup plus durable? Donc, en faisant en sorte que, par exemple, l'humanitaire et le développement soient sur la même longueur d'onde et de permettre qu'on ait des solutions durables. Et donc, en mettant, par exemple, les collectivités territoriales au centre de la recherche de solutions, nous avons créé, par exemple, ce que nous appelons la cellule municipale de résilience urbaine, qui se trouve être la cheville ouvrière de mise en œuvre de projets à l'échelle de ces 4 villes. Et aujourd'hui, avec la création de ces cellules municipales de résilience urbaine, nous avons la communauté humanitaire qui est en train de s'organiser autour de cette cellule municipale de résilience urbaine pour qu'on puisse aussi réfléchir à des solutions durables, donc à une approche beaucoup plus intégrée, c'est-à-dire qu'on imagine le développement, on imagine la réponse humanitaire en lien avec la vision de développement aussi au niveau territorial. Donc, c'est environ 150 000 personnes qui sont les bénéficiaires cibles de notre projet. Et dans notre projet, nous avons aussi, j'ai suivi la présentation d'Angélica, j'allais revenir là-dessus. Nous avons aussi le besoin aussi de créer des établissements humains durables aussi, au profit des communautés vulnérables et des PDI aussi. Et parce que la particularité chez nous, les PDI sont venus, les populations sont arrivées à l'échelle de ces villes-là et elles ont bénéficié, par exemple, de l'hospitalité de ces populations, des populations hautes. Aujourd'hui, ces populations hautes sont des populations, il y en a qui sont devenues des populations vulnérables du fait qu'elles pensaient que c'est une crise passagère, peut-être 2-3 mois, mais elles se rendent compte aujourd'hui que c'est une crise qui prend des envergures. Ça fait 5 à 6 ans qu'elles hébergent des populations déplacées. Comment faire en sorte que aussi on puisse venir en aide à ces populations qui voient aujourd'hui leurs moyens de subsistance réduits et aussi leurs conditions d'habitabilité, l'espace qui est réduit du fait de l'accueil de ces PDI. Donc, en termes d'apport de ce projet, c'est de pouvoir avoir une vision beaucoup plus holistique, non seulement en améliorant les conditions d'habitabilité de ces populations à travers la construction de 500 unités de logement, mais également aussi la fourniture de services sociaux de base dans les zones d'influence de nos sites de projet, mais qui puissent bénéficier aussi à la communauté haute parce que l'un des objectifs clés dans le cadre de ce projet, c'est véritablement de travailler à la promotion de la cohésion sociale entre les populations déplacées qui sont arrivées dans ces villes et aussi entre les populations autochtones qui les ont ouvert leurs portes, mais aujourd'hui, c'est de faire en sorte qu'on arrive à renforcer cette cohésion sociale. Une des dimensions les plus importantes aussi, c'est de dire que dans le cadre de ce projet, on veut œuvrer aussi à faire en sorte que la cohésion, la concertation intercommunale puisse permettre qu'on renforce davantage l'approche Nexus. Aujourd'hui, vous avez des communes dont les exécutifs municipaux, c'est-à-dire les conseils municipaux, ont délocalisé leur siège dans certaines communes du fait de l'insécurité qu'elles subissent, par exemple, dans leurs communes. Comment faire en sorte aujourd'hui qu'on ait une autre approche, une approche de développement territorial, que les communes aient une approche de développement territorial dans le cadre de la gestion de la crise humanitaire. Donc, sous l'égide, par exemple, de l'association des municipalités, nous sommes en train de voir aussi avec les maires de ces 2 régions, donc les maires des communes de déplacés et les maires des communes d'accueil, comment créer la concertation intercommunale pour que les infrastructures qui seront réalisées, soit par certains bailleurs, ou même dans le cadre de notre projet, que ça puisse bénéficier à l'ensemble des communes du point de vue approche territoriale et qui puisse servir aussi à d'autres bailleurs comme orientation pour la réalisation des infrastructures d'envergure sous-régionale en tenant compte de ça. Et c'est cette même approche qui est promue au niveau du gouvernement à travers, par exemple, le programme d'urgence pour le Sahel, qui est une approche à la fois humanitaire et développement, parce que comme on le dit, c'est souvent quand il n'y a pas les actions de développement on creuse les terreaux du sous-développement et on crée aussi des situations compliquées. Et donc, en résumé, c'est ce que je peux dire sur le projet que nous sommes en train d'implémenter au Burkina. Et au passage, je souligne que c'est un projet qui bénéficie de l'accompagnement financier de la Commission européenne et aussi du gouvernement qui assure le portage politique de ce projet. Donc, c'est ce que je peux dire comme en guise d'introduction. S'il y a des éléments de question, on pourrait revenir là-dessus par la suite. Merci, Stéphanie.
Thank you very much, Yombi. And
j'espère que la traduction aussi a fonctionné.
I hope so as well. J'espère aussi. So no, I think you mentioned another very interesting point that wasn't highlighted before. That one thing is, of course, involving local authorities, which is already, of course, a very important point. But in those cellules municipales, there's also an involvement of the beneficiaries. And that means from both sides, that means the displaced communities, but also the host communities, because I think what you also highlighted, what is specific for the project, is that in the end, it takes an area-based approach, which means that any sort of interventions does not focus on one population group, but actually ensures that the urban environment in a specific city or in a specific area is actually improved. So that will also of course, add to the point on the social cohesion, because I think that what we've seen, at least in Burkina, that some activities specifically by humanitarian actors sometimes even leads to an increase in tensions. For example, if host communities feel that they have been neglected while they're actually having as little access to services as, as the IDPs. So I think that was a very important point. Thanks, Yombi. We do have a chat ongoing, so please, everybody, if you have questions, feel free to use the chat, put in your questions. We have, after the third speaker, after Jahal, we will have a question and answer session, and we're collecting questions in the chat. So from Burkina Faso, we're staying in West Africa. Please let me hand over to Falmata Omar Lawan, who's the Director of the State Ministry for Women Affairs and Social Development in Borno, in Nigeria. So I don't know, Falmata, if you can turn on your camera so we can actually see you, if that works for the connection details. Falmata, are you online? Okay. I think she might have some technical problems here. Falmata, or Sama, if you could try to reach out as well to her, or can see how we can actually manage to increase the connection details. But maybe what I'll do, Jahal, if that would be okay with you, maybe we'll start with your intervention on Cameroon then. And we hope that Falmata actually manages to join a bit later. So let me just also introduce Mr. Jahal Demeritans, who is the Humanitarian Development Coordinator in Cameroon. So over to you, Jahal, and thanks very much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much. Bonjour tout le monde. I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah, it works. We can see your screen. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Sorry about this. So Cameroon faces three simultaneous crises stemming from the Boko Haram attacks in the far north region, the flows of refugees due to the crisis in Central African Republic, and the social political crisis with the secessionist demands in the Northwest and Southwest regions. These crises have led to large-scale forced displacement affecting 9 of Cameroon's 10 regions.
Shahal, we are also seeing both of your screens. So at the moment, we're seeing the Word document as well as the presentation.
Okay, so let me change this. How is it now?
Now it's better, thank you.
Can you see only the slide?
No, we can again see the Word document as well.
The document. Okay. And now?
Now just the slide, yes.
Thank you. So I was saying that they are often referred to as humanitarian crises. I'm personally against the use of this expression. It usually implies that the response to the crisis must be provided exclusively by humanitarian actors. Other actors are absolved of their responsibility to act on the causes of the crisis themselves. Protracted crises are compounded by negative synergies that have had a significant and lasting impact on the social, economic, human rights, security, and political sectors, and interweaving of problems that mutually reinforce each other and affect the overall situation of the person or the community. Approaching the protracted crisis in Cameroon invites a broader vision than those adopted so far, one that encompasses education, employment, housing and habitat, food, environment, security and displacement, among others. To address the causes and long-term impact of this crisis, we need to create positive synergies between programmatic frameworks, such as helping people cope with adversity, increasing their resilience through social protection, access to basic services, and improve living conditions in homes and public spaces. Or protect and create jobs, support small and medium enterprises, and include informal sector workers in economic response and recovery programs. The informal sector in Cameroon is about 80%. Promote social cohesion and invest in community-led resilience and response systems. To do this, we need to stop working in silos and strengthen positive synergies between humanitarian action, development support, and peace building, aiming at reaching collective outcomes at the community level. In our opinion, this is what the humanitarian development peace nexus is about, at the community level. In Cameroon, we identify convergence areas where inequality is a crucial factor, where the populations affected by forced displacement bear the greater cost. These are urban, rural, or border municipalities that specific criteria have selected, and in which different actors across the humanitarian development and peace dimensions converge and create synergies between their interventions, contributing programmatically towards the achievement of the collective outcome by the end of 2026 through their complementary but distinct actions and planning tools. These synergies ensure that the combined results exceed the sum of their individual projects to benefit the most vulnerable populations and contribute to attaining the SDGs by 2030. Joint humanitarian development peace-building action plans will be developed for each selected convergence area to enhance coordination and strengthen coherence and complementarity under the leadership of the mayor in these municipalities. The joint action plans will be embedded into the municipality's communal development plan an annual implementation plan, and organizations will contribute as per their mandate, principles, and resources. We realized in Cameroon that the operationalization of the humanitarian development peace nexus approach requires a full-time capacity at national, regional, and local levels. The creation of my position as a humanitarian development peace coordinator in support of the resident coordinator has been recorded as a good field practice. My role is to develop the Nexus approach, advocate with national, regional, and local actors, ensure the selection of convergence areas, the rollout of the approach in these municipalities, and the creation of coordination and accountability mechanisms. And Nexus coordination positions have also been created at regional and municipal level. There are several challenges to advancing the humanitarian development peace nexus in Cameroon. Cameroon is underfunded. There is a lack of humanitarian and development financing. There's not much we can do about it except for advocating and trying to be more efficient with our scarce resources. Secondly, rolling out the nexus in the Northwest and Southwest regions is difficult due to the insecurity and the non-state armed actors' resistance towards reconstruction and development that they do not want to take place before a ceasefire and a peace process are negotiated. Populations displaced in urban areas may not want to be identified as such out of fear of being ostracized by the host community. The lack of development assistance in the Eastern Front impedes the rollout of the Nexus. We advocate with development actors for a more substantial presence in those regions, but this is also linked to funding decisions. And strategic durable solutions and the coordination of the Nexus approach have proven difficult to fund through discordant humanitarian development and peace-building financing mechanisms. Population growth creates need for more land, shelter, and infrastructure in Cameroon's crisis-affected regions. The capacity of government authorities responsible for physical planning is weak, as are the resources for investments into infrastructure and services, particularly in these three crisis areas that have been affected by neglect and underdevelopment. Due to a rapid urban population growth resulting from forced displacement, the situation has been aggravated, leading to an increase in informal settlements in urban and peri-urban areas with limited access to sanitation, waste and water management, or electricity for the most vulnerable. The urban sprawl also impacts food security, as areas formerly used for town near agricultural production have now been transformed into settlement areas. The rapid influx of additional population from rural areas, refugees, returnees, and IDPs in urban areas generates social cohesion challenges stemming from competition for land, resources, and livelihoods, insufficient facilities for education and health. Mistrust between different population groups grows based on bias, prejudice, or traumatic experiences. Without proper planning, houses and shelter are often constructed on unsuitable land by populations having limited skills. The Nexus approach in Cameroon addresses two specific urbanization challenges: the right to housing, access to land and property, or access to compensation in the protection, social cohesion, and local governance pillar, and the sustainable access to resilient, decent, and adapted housing in the basic social services pillar. The protracted conflict in the Far North region, paired with the impact of climate change in the Sahel, have increased poverty and led to forced displacement. In the municipalities of Fotokol and Zamai have been affected by a lack of spatial planning tools that amplified unequal access to basic services, conflict and displacement, food security, and poverty. Their capacities and resources to resolve the multidimensional causes hindering their social and economic development are very limited. A joint program that includes UN Habitat, FAO, UNDP, and UNICEF has been set up for operationalizing the Nexus through a humanitarian security approach in the two conversions areas of Fotokol and Zamai, building on humanitarian dividends. The program's components align for achieving their overall goal, and they build upon each other, while proposing activities that help people meeting their most basic needs, such as increasing their access to clean water, enabling them to access more food. The project also promotes the humanitarian security approach and supports the return to dignified lives and the enjoyment of basic human rights. Even though the two communities, alongside many in the Far North region, are currently facing a humanitarian crisis, the project, in line with the Nexus approach, introduces activities that foster social cohesion, help to rebuild trust in authorities, and set the basis for evidence-based sustainable community development through participatory integrated land use planning. I will end by saying that I've been told that you can find three kinds of humanitarian development or peace actors: the ones who can count and the ones who cannot. So I'm going to use a simple equation. 1 + 1 = 3. Synergy, it's about synergy. Synergy is everywhere in nature. If you plant two plants close together, the roots commingle and improve the quality of the soil so that both plants will grow together better than if they were separated. If you put two pieces of wood together, they will hold much more than the total weight held by each separately. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Synergies, or the Nexus, is better than my way or your way. It is our way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rahal. Thank you very much for this very nice presentation. And thank you for putting some really important points on the table, like just by actually labeling a crisis, the humanitarian crisis, you actually invite specific actors with a specific mindset as well, while you might, actually need to address other issues very strongly, such as inequality or social inclusion, which actually is, among climate change and many other things, of course, one of the main reasons for this conflict. So thank you very much for bringing that up. And also, I very much like the point about the synergies. That is very important, because I think this is what the Nexus is about. And that's also what Angelica said at the very beginning. Thanks a lot. Let me now see if we have our speaker from Nigeria, or I just understand that her colleague Shetima is now with us. Shetima, can you speak? Because I understand that Famata was not able to join. I'm just trying to find my way around. There's if anyone from the Nigeria team could maybe just...
Hi, Shetima.
Yeah, hello.
Good, perfect. Thank you.
So she's having some connectivity problem, but she's like in process of joining the, I saw Sam just send an email. This Zoom is more easier than the Microsoft team. So she's trying to join up. I just dropped a call with her. She's joining up.
Shetima, I wonder in the meantime if you could give us an overview of the From Response to Resilience project in Maiduguri that you're working on, along with local actors within Borno, and give also a little bit of background of yourself. But maybe I was singing the praises of the project during my remarks, so I wonder if you could sort of highlight what you think is unique, both yourself being from Borno, and the collaboration with ACTED, your organization, and the local actors within Borno.
Thank you very much for this opportunity, Samir. So, as you can see, the project from Response to Resilience in Maiduguri is first of its kind. I know GIZ and Mexico have some, but you know, our own is the kind of response is different from theirs. So, from Response to Resilience project is, I think it's like this is the first of its kind. Like I said, it's a project whereby we are dealing with local authorities, traditional institutions, and community level people. So it's a consortium led by IRC, Impact and Acted. So IRC, they are more of community engagement, while Impact are more of assessment, while Acted, we are like the linkage between the government and the community. So we deal more with government stakeholders, traditional institutions, and service providers. So I can like go deep into IRC or Impact. Let me just precisely speak on Acted. So in this project from Response to Resilience, I think we're trying to create a synergy between the local authorities and traditional institutions and link them up with the service providers. What we mean by service providers in when we say service providers in some communities, there are a lot of service providers like the patent medicine sellers, chapel sellers, the water vendors, and more. So what we are trying to do is link up between these service providers and the traditional authorities. And from there, we will link them up to the government authorities. So we create what's called, we have the neighborhood working group in the neighborhood level and the city level collaboration forum in the city level. So the neighborhood working group is a combination of all service providers that are providing services in the neighborhood, while that includes the traditional rulers, elders forums, community forums, religious leaders, minority group, people with disability, and so on and so forth. So, and the traditional rulers, we have level of Lawan that is Lawan, we have Blamas and representative that's scribe from the Ajab that is part of that neighborhood working group. And in the city level, all the actors that are involved in the all government ministries, government agencies, the national NGOs, and what have you, all of them, they are part of city level collaboration forum. So in the meantime, what we are doing, there is no synergy between these actors. So what we're doing is to create synergy between these actors, to link them up so that the government officials from the top will know what's going on in the grassroots. That's the neighborhood. So people from the neighborhood, where IRC is like training them on advocacy and so on, so that it will they will know on how to pay this advocacy visit or how to present their problems in the neighborhood to the government officials. So we have achieved it. Yeah.
So actually, Falmata joined. So as you're speaking of government officials and how Acted and the project works both on the grassroots, hearing from communities within Maiduguri, getting their input, and then connecting that input to government actors, I wonder, Falmata, if you can jump in here, if we have you, and sort of speak to the benefit the project has brought your ministry within Borno State. Hope the connection works, Falmata. Falmata, I see you're off mute, but can you hear us?
The network down here is a little bit tricky.
Yeah.
I think that's always the problem.
Yeah, the network is like, even me, I'm using it from the office directly. That's why I have a very good network.
Well, I mean, Falmata, thank you for joining. If you can hear us, I'm sorry that the connection isn't working, so we can hear your perspective. But Shatima, thank you so much for your intervention and for stepping in. I think just to highlight one thing, Stephanie, if I may, before we move on. I'm glad, Shatima, that you backed up some comments that I made in my interventions, which is that the project From Response to Resilience in Maiduguri is the first of its kind within Maiduguri, something that I was fortunate enough to work on at the International Rescue Committee. But it's important to note that we started that project years into the conflict. And I think that's really a big takeaway, at least for me, is that it took sort of years of missed opportunity to ultimately come to a strategy, a small strategy, which actually empowered, or let me say elevated government leadership, involved them in the process, as well as local community. And Shatima used the same word that Jahal used to close his intervention, which is synergy, and really figuring out how to achieve that synergy in our interventions, regardless of what stakeholder we represent, I think is really important and something that we'll start to unpack in the next session. Stephanie, sorry, over to you.
No, that's perfectly fine. And I think, well, I'm very sorry that the network is so bad in Nigeria. And I think that already a bit shows that, you know, the digital device, that digital device that we're at the moment facing for all the online meetings, that actually those people that we would like to hear, those who are on the ground, that those who can actually really provide the information on what's happening and what is needed, are often out of reach. And I think that is really something that the global community is also struggling with. But Shatima, thank you very much actually for bringing up the point as well. And I think we've also heard that from Burkina, that apart from bringing in, you know, local actors, of course, also bringing on other stakeholders like civil society and also private sector actors, it's important that there is a coordination and alignment also between the different governance levels. So I think that is a point, you know, that obviously, as much as I've understood, the connection was a bit weak, is quite an important point, and also is something that is obviously part of the project approach in Nigeria, because as I can see, Falmata, who was supposed to speak, is part of the ministry, the State Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development, while of course the project is a local project. So I think this is the third element that actually is very important for the humanitarian development nexus, that sort of approach and this coordination between the different governance levels. So I thank all the speakers very much for their different inputs. I think I would propose we go now into the breakout rooms. And before we do that, just as a small interactive element again in this session, we do have another poll. So maybe we can just start those 2 questions in the poll, and then we would invite all participants to select into which breakout rooms they would like to go. So we actually decided we have a breakout room for those who would like to take the perspective of humanitarians, for those who would like to take the perspective of development actors, and also those who would like to take the experience of and share the perspective of the peace actors. And in the end, in those breakout rooms, what we're going to try to do with you is actually, from the different perspectives, find out more about what can be done to actually advance the nectars. So, you know, what are the challenges some of you might have experienced in their work on the ground, or also what is the situation in your local context? And then the second question that you would need to answer is also like, what you think can be done to actually improve the coordination. So I think it's going to be very exciting in those breakout rooms. But maybe we do the poll first, and then I think you need to click to go to the breakout rooms. And after the breakout rooms, you will be taken back to the forum again, and we'll share the different examples collected in the breakout rooms. So over. We have the question and answers. Sorry. Yes.
I think we're going to use Menti for this poll because the Zoom polls were having some issues before. So there'll be two questions, and you can follow the Menti link that I placed into the chat, and you can use the code 36173280, which you can also see in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. And then while we're preparing this and before we go into the breakout room, of course, we want to give participants the opportunity to ask some questions to the speakers. I couldn't completely follow the chat, but I hope we have some information in the chat. So first we'll have the poll, then we have the questions and answers, and then we will actually go into the breakout rooms. So the first question in the Menti is actually, which actor do you think may find it most challenging to adapt their practices or principles to contribute to the HDP Nexus? I hope we get more answers than 2, 3. Okay, so we've got 45 people on this session. At the moment, we have something like 6 answers. So maybe the others could also go to Menti and just share their experience. Yes, we're getting there. It seems quite equal. So 12 people answered. Okay, so it'll be very interesting actually in the humanitarian group to actually see what can be done differently if so many people think that obviously the humanitarians have the biggest challenges for adapting their practices. Okay. Okay, so I think, Owen, we have a slide where we've put together the questions. Also, at the moment, I cannot see if someone raises their hand, but please, if you have any questions that you might have put in the chat, you can also speak freely. We'll just take some time to see if there are any questions.
I think Rebecca Koos has a question for Shayla about the Burkina Faso presentation. I can read it out here. Shayla, I hope the translation is working, but Rebecca asks if you could say something about how host and migrant communities interaction and the internal city movement of migrants, such as do migrants move house within the city, or do they usually tend to stay where they arrive, such as their arrival city?
Okay, so
Hi everyone. Thank you for reading out loud. I'm happy to explain and elaborate. I saw a typo in there, so it's a bit.
Yeah, no, please, Rebecca, please explain.
No, I was just wondering basically how the host communities and the migrant communities in Burkina Faso, in the 4 cities that he's working in, whether, say, it's very mixed or is it very segregated? That's one. And if it's segregated, is it so that you have this one migrant quarter And do they tend to stay there, or do they move on kind of and then integrate into the social fabric? What happens in a lot of cities, I think, but I'm not sure what's the situation in Burkina Faso.
Yombi, over to you.
Oui, oui. En réalité, au Burkina, la crise humanitaire là, est caractérisée par disons, les déplacements des populations est caractérisé par leur origine de départ. Ça veut dire que quoi? Les migrants qui viennent dans une ville, ils viennent parce qu'il y avait leurs parents ou arrière-grands-parents qui viennent de cette ville. Donc, les déplacements des populations sont fonction de la disponibilité de leurs origines dans telle ou telle ville. Donc, on a un plein, par exemple, de voir des Peuls qui quittent, par exemple, dans l'extrême nord pour aller vers la ville de Dori, où ils ont des parents, où ils partent, qui les accueillent. Donc, quand vous arrivez dans une ville, vous avez des migrants que vous n'allez pas voir en dehors des sites temporaires d'abri. Vous avez des communautés hôtes qui accueillent les déplacés internes parce que ce sont les enfants ou bien les arrière-petits-fils de tels grands-parents qui vivaient dans telle localité, et de telle sorte que c'est la solidarité légendaire qui caractérise le peuple burkinabé là, qui est mise en avant, de telle sorte qu'ils les accueillent parce que ce sont leurs parents. Ils sont issus, par exemple, de la troisième ou quatrième génération de tels arrière-grands-parents. Et donc, en réalité, c'est comme s'ils revenaient dans leur famille ancestrale. Et donc, c'est des gens qui sont accueillis sous ce format. C'est pour ça que vous allez voir qu'au Burkina, il y a 80% des PDI, des populations déplacées, donc des migrants, qui sont accueillis dans des communautés hôtes. Ce n'est pas des communautés hôtes qui sont étrangères de ces migrants, mais c'est des communautés hôtes qui connaissent ces migrants-là. C'est pour ça qu'ils les accueillent sous leur toit, parce que c'est des arrière-grands-parents. Donc, il y a une certaine stabilisation de ces PDI à l'échelle de la ville, mais progressivement, comme je le disais tantôt, la crise a perduré. Et compte tenu du fait que la crise a perduré, les conditions d'habitabilité sont devenues très petites, et donc ça crée la promiscuité, et aussi ça crée aussi les questions de VBG. Quand une communauté haute veut, par exemple, pense que par exemple, parmi les PDI que j'ai accueillis, il y a des jeunes filles dedans, et que dans sa cour, il y a des jeunes garçons aussi, et ces cas de VBG peuvent se présenter. Souvent, il dit, bon, j'ai un lopin de terre à quelque part, là, j'ai construit une maison dessus, vous pouvez héberger, vous pouvez vous délocaliser dans cette maison, mais c'est essentiellement toujours sur le même avec les communautés PDI. Donc, il n'y a pas une certaine instabilité de déplacement, il n'y a pas de mobilité à l'échelle de la ville des PDI, mais une certaine stabilité, et il n'y a pas de conflit aussi qui soit né de la coexistence entre les deux communautés, PDI et migrants et communautés d'accueil. Il y a une certaine stabilité qui n'est, en tout cas, il n'y a pas encore, jusqu'à présent, il n'y a pas de conflit qui soit né du fait de l'accueil de ces PDI à l'échelle de la ville, quoi.
Merci beaucoup. Super interesting.
I think maybe just adding to this, something that is also very specific for the Burkinabe context is that the government actually specifically didn't want any camps. So I think that is also, first of all, there's this big hospitality that Yombi mentioned, but then there's of course also the government directive that there shouldn't be any camps. So this actually really leads to the fact that there are IDPs who have not found any accommodation with their families, that they actually are all over the cities. So they're not sort of, you know, in a separate quarter or anything. And that, of course, you know, in the end, if this isn't addressed very fast, this will lead to a sort of, well, increase in informal settlements, because people, you know, still have the wish to have more formal structures than just tents that have been provided. But at the moment, the problem is really that there are lots of tents all over the cities. Over to you, Owen, for more questions.
While more questions are coming in, I would also ask the speakers if you have any questions for each other based on the presentations or from your different roles or positions within the HDP Nexus.
J'ai une question.
Oui,
I'm just
vas-y, Gurmeet.
unmuting you now.
Ouais.
Oui. J'ai une question à l'endroit de Angelica. Elle avait dans sa, je crois que c'est elle, c'est Angelica. Elle avait parlé de sa présentation qu'ils ont eu à intervenir dans une ville qu'elle ne citerait pas, mais je présume que c'est le Congo parce qu'elle a laissé quelques indicateurs liés par exemple à Ebola, soit c'est le Congo ou bien c'est le Libéria, où elle a dit qu'ils ont commencé leur projet et par la suite, le PNUD est venu avec sa contribution, l'UNICEF est venu avec sa contribution, le HCR, l'OIM, etc. Je voudrais savoir, est-ce que c'est dans la conception de départ du projet qu'ils ont créé ce cadre de concertation où c'est comme si c'était un joint programme qu'ils ont conçu, ou bien c'est pendant le processus que les autres acteurs, c'est-à-dire les agents des Nations Unies, ont vu la nécessité de venir avec leur contribution dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de ce projet. C'est en cours de route que ça s'est fait, ou bien c'est au début, et comment ils se sont pris? Parce que quand on sait qu'aujourd'hui, les Nations Unies aussi, chacun travaille de son côté, même si on dit One UN qui reste en une fiction, et il mobilise des ressources. Comment cette synergie-là, cette coordination a été faite à l'échelle de cette ville-là pour que ce projet-là puisse atteindre les résultats escomptés? Voilà la question que je voulais poser à Angélique.
Is that okay? I can understand the French, but I can't respond in French. I'm sorry. So I'll go ahead and respond in English. Sorry about that. But actually, it was, I didn't say Ebola, I said cholera pandemic. And the country that I was describing is Zimbabwe, actually. And it's a Hopley, which is a area outside of Harare. So I think it was both that the UNCT was very strong. They had an RC at the moment who kept them very much in line, but also donors pressed for more humanitarian development peace coordination. But at the end of the day, most of the UN organizations actually put their own funds. So it wasn't a comprehensive project. They even took from core funding, etc. So they managed to finance this together. And it was very much also, I must remember, there was a strong representative of UNFPA who is Senegalese. So it's probably the West African, kind of influence on this. Sheikh Sisi, who was very much about this shouldn't cost so much more money. We don't need to ask for a lot of funding. We just do what we are supposed to do with the funding we have, and we do it coherently. We plan together for this area. And when it started to work better and better, then donors also got more interested and wanted to fund the project, where they saw that there was this coherence between both the UN family, the local authorities driving, and they got some private sector financing, and also got some of the NGOs, the major international NGOs, to provide training in the facilities that were brought. So, for example, MSF would come with the menstrual hygiene kits and talk about SRHR, and Plan International would do education about young people. But it took a lot of time to coordinate. And I think it's these strong leaders that envisage that we can work together that make it work, I think. So that was a short answer to, several year-long project. I didn't say it was very, easy to start. And it had there was elections and there was political changes as we go through. So at some points it was like standing still, and then it continued again. So it was a lot of work behind the scenes.
Thank you, Angelica, for your answer. I see we have another question from Asabur at Trafi. If you'd like to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Stephanie and colleague, for the invitation. I think I briefly introduced myself in the chat with Summer. I work for UNHCR, but I am for the moment on leave, so I'm joining this meeting in my personal capacity as an urban planner and refugee advocate. I appreciate all the insights. I have a question for Angelica on the common country analysis. that you mentioned in your presentation. I would imagine this is very complex given the involvement of many actors and different sectors. What was the process like for one of these common country analyses? And what were the top 3 challenges that you faced or different actors faced in the Nexus? Thank you.
Yes, so I'll just go ahead and answer them as best as I can, if that's okay. So the common country analysis have been used in many countries, and in the past they used to be like a document you set together, and they got the main macroeconomic, political indicators, etc. together. Now the UN in the UN reform has decided that the common analysis should be more flexible and more of a process, because we know the reality is that there is fortunately a volcano exploding like recently in DRC. There is political changes, there are hurricanes, etc. So we no longer think we need to have a more kind of continuing planning. And it is still a huge challenge to get all the databases, because there's a lot of information from UNICEF, from World Food Programme, from UN Habitat, from us, and getting all those statisticians to work together, and then at the end of the day, the national authorities to take a lead around the statistics. But I think we're getting there more and more, also thanks to the IT development. So there's much more IT. There's the U report being used more and more for assembling data and collection. IOM has a very strong, what we call displacement tracking matrix, DTM. But I think it is, as at the heart of HDPN, it is the local authorities, it's the people in the country who has to analyze the data and own it. It can't just be data produced by statisticians abroad and sent around. I don't know if I really answered the question, but I was giving a, and there's been a lot of different common analysis being done at the moment. And I think it's very hard to compare. I was involved in the country of El Salvador, where you have 4 million people, and then you compare it to a country like DRC, where you have hundreds of millions of people. And I think we have to make sure that these country analyses also go down into regions. Ethiopia is another huge country where you can't just have one analysis for the whole country per se.
Thank you, Angelica, for your interesting answer. I think we have one message in the chat box from Leila Zibar. Leila, would you like to ask this question in person?
Hello, thank you for giving me the floor. I have been working on refugee camps in my research for some time, and understanding the problems between, especially in Iraq, for example, the bridging between the humanitarian action and also the development action has been always a challenge, especially in chronic conflict zones where you have a resurgence of conflicts over time. So you always have a humanitarian emergency emerging where everything stops or the development projects stop in the same time. So I would first ask, how do you think that the humanitarian development peace nexus could work in such zones? Because it's not a linear process, it is more a linear process that is interrupted every now and then. So how would you work? Would you think that some policies or at least some kind of practices have been successful in such context? And then my second question is, it's for everybody as well. So many cities and urban forms always act like waiting zones for many refugees and displaced who don't want actually to stay there. They're more like of waiting, resting to embark on a new journey to their desired destination or where opportunities lie better than other countries. So how does the HDP Nexus as well think about this group? What are types of practices and policies, or at least successful stories, could also inspire us to understand how to address these groups? Thank you.
I see Stephanie, you have your hands up. Would you like to address this question?
Yes, I would like to. Of course, Leila, thanks for this question. And I think specifically, well, UN Habitat is usually like a development agency, but we do have, for example, many projects in humanitarian situations, and that actually includes in Iraq, where there's, of course, the large IDP challenge for the cities. So for the people, of course, but also for the cities where the IDPs have moved to. The other main question, which is really a development question, but it is applied in a humanitarian context, is the question of land rights. And so I think those, and Angelica Resi also mentioned that in her presentation, that sometimes it's a root cause, but sometimes it's something that also needs to be addressed in a situation. The right of people to land is really an issue, and it's even more so in cities where land is usually, well, very scarce, as are other natural resources. And so I've put in the chat some of the projects UN Habitat has been doing in those, well, crisis context, so that might inspire you for some more projects. And maybe, I don't know, Jahal or also Samer or again Angelica would like to answer this question. I think this is the last question, and then we would go into breakout rooms just to make sure we also have enough time for that. Over from my side.
Can I come in? Thank you. Sorry, I can't raise my hand. I don't know why. So the first question, and it is an issue that we're facing in several areas. We have, for example, for the Northwest and Southwest region, we put into place a risk mitigation working group where the humanitarians and the development actors are sharing information on the access, the security situation, the changes in the environment, and the consequences that the different projects can have, negative or positive, on each other in that context. And that allowed to first, in some cases, to foresee or to prepare, in a sense, to a situation that can get complicated, or to reduce the risks for the different actors, or to do no harm. We found this quite useful. To your second question, in Cameroon, for example, I was listening to the experience of Burkina Faso with a lot of interest, where the displaced people are welcomed to their family or to their area of origin. In Cameroon, in many places, it's not the case. The displaced just have to find a way to live in a city where they are not welcome, where they want to disappear. You raise that yourself, and they often one person will rent a room, for example, and there will be 15 who will be sleeping there between 10 o'clock in the evening and 4 o'clock in the morning, then disappearing. And they will resort to negative coping mechanisms such as mendicity or prostitution, for example. So it's very difficult to identify them because they don't want to be identified, because they don't want to be ostracized. So in these cases, as the work in the Nexus is not about supporting displacement, but supporting communities affected by displacement, and it includes the host communities or the communities of origin, then you look at the increase of use of the services. If there is an influx in health centers, for example, or in different other services, you know that there is an influx of displaced people in this area. So by supporting those services and ensure that they can deal with the influx, you will also provide for the displaced people without putting them into a situation where you will have to register them. If they decide to go back home, and we hope they will one day, even better, but they are not in the obligation to be registered.
Thank you, Jahal.
Thank you.
Would anybody else like to contribute? Or we can move on to the breakout rooms.
No, I think this answer from Rahal also really shows that in the end, not one solution fits all, even in the humanitarian development nexus, as the situation and, also picking up the point on the local contexts, the situations are really, even though they might seem similar, large numbers of IDPs coming into cities, in the end, the challenges that IDPs in cities face are really very different. So there needs to be this local tailoring. Samir, I didn't want to cut you off. Please go.
No, just very quickly on the point of cities, specifically cities within the global south, quote unquote, serving as sort of a waiting station for those on their way to Europe. One good example that we can point to is ODI's Mayors Dialogue, which actually connects European mayors to African mayors in trying to figure out solutions between diaspora on one continent and those on the other. For example, specifically pointing to a collaboration between Barcelona and the city of Dakar, Senegal, and really trying to figure out how Barcelona can actually support economic opportunities within Dakar to sort of, I don't want to say disincentivize, but just create greater economic opportunity within Dakar so that people aren't forced to look for it outside.
Thanks, Amr, for your answer. That's very interesting. I think we best move forward with the breakout rooms. Given the time, I would suggest instead of 20 minutes, we'll spend 15 minutes in the breakout room. So we'll have 10 minutes when we return to present the results. So as said, I'm going to open them now. You have a choice to be either a humanitarian, development, or peace actor. I've just been informed that the translation service won't work within the breakout rooms, so we'll have to make do. I think Stephanie has the best French, which is an option. Okay, so. Hi, Stephanie.
Okay, so I don't know, we might have probably lost some people on the way back and forth, and I think even Sama with his group has not returned, but still, maybe you would like to start with your group first, with the humanitarian one, and then we'll go over for the peace building. We'll try to keep it really short, because I think I have another meeting to come as well. Okay. I can see you. Okay, so the development actors, they were many. Oh God. Okay, there is Samir with his group. You're muted, Owen.
Sorry about that. Thank you. I'm going to invite Leila to talk about the two main points that we discussed. I'm talking about the first question. Leila, would you like to say some words?
Yeah, so regarding the first question about the challenging that you have experienced or can imagine arising from implementing the HDP nexus in the urban areas. So we had a few points, but we voted for two main points, which is first, the victimization of the displaced group, which is basically creates a different problem because it dismisses how strong they are in taking the decision of moving, but also the way that they coped along the road till they arrived to this place. And then by giving and taking, always treating them as the victims, always in this idea of giving them, not empowering them to actually understand what do they need, what are their needs, and what they imagine they need, instead of imposing what we think they need as basic needs. Could be the basic needs for somebody is understanding the opportunities, the information, instead of food and shelter. So it's always problematic to understand. So it's really interesting would be to think and to look about the powerful agents that rise inside of these groups. But also the second point for us is the time aspect. So what is time and to whom we're talking about? So the crisis could be short-term, and also the group itself could be temporary here. However, the spatial impacts that we do are permanent to a large extent, whether even by putting a tent there, but also there is a system and there is environmental impacts also on the fragile system that usually the host communities have. So these 2 points, we think they are challenging in implementing the development, the HDP nexus. But then we would like to highlight only 1 point for the time as well about the humanitarian actors need to change in the way of working and thinking, basically to think of inclusive measures and inclusivity in the meaning of access to opportunities, because not everybody, inclusivity doesn't mean it's collects for all, but also the existence of different opportunities where everybody can find their way is very important, because it also empowers the people to choose for themselves instead of choosing for them. And that's the 2 points we would like to highlight. Thank you.
I'm sorry we don't make much more time to discuss that, but thank you very much, Leila, for your good points. Maybe I'll hand over to Stephanie. You can present, or your presenter can talk about the development breakout room.
Okay, so
you can share your screen to the mural.
I'll share the screen and then I'll hand over to Janina and to Rebecca. Let me just make sure the mural keeps disappearing on my... Just give me a second. Maybe some
I can share it for you, Stephanie. I can go into it.
Wait. No. I want to manage technically. Come on. Okay, there it is. Okay, so over to Janina and then to Rebecca.
Great. So when it comes to challenges, we have to say that in our group, there were a lot of people very interested in peace actors, but mostly coming themselves from other areas. So we said that one of the challenges is if you are looking into areas, thinking, for instance, of Ethiopia, where you have a long history of having different ethnic groups. Yeah, you have to take that history into account. Also in cases when crises erupt, even though some actors might go in rather quickly and then come back out, and others have been working there for a really long time. And then we had a second example from Kampala to illustrate how sometimes, different actors might work almost against each other because they have different goals. And here the example was an area of the city where really a vulnerable population would live in precarious conditions and basically living at the border of a swamp. And so the city, in cooperation with some actors, tried to actually get them to move to another part of the city, while other actors tried to support them in establishing themselves there, and we're raising questions of free displacement. So for us, these were two important points when it comes to cooperation between actors from the HDP nexus. And I hand over to Rebecca.
Okay, thank you, Janina. With regard to peace, coming from 3 non-peace workers, I guess, we were wondering what's the role of peace in this nexus, and what was also mentioned earlier in the lectures discussions is that the role of peace is basically the foundation for both development and humanitarian. So it's neither just a glue between both, but the foundation. That's one. And then we also noticed that what are the challenges in this nexus, and it is, for instance, funding, because either has a different logic of funding mechanisms, and they might clash, they might work together, and some are more flexible, some less, some more have different focus. So these might be the challenges.
Thanks, and maybe we hand over to Samuel now and his group, his presenters.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. We were very lucky to have a diverse group of both international actors and local actors, as Falmata was able to join us and contribute, which was great, from Borno State. I'll just quickly share my screen. Maybe in the interest of everybody's time, I'll take this one. But just to sort of highlight some challenges, divide in the communities, obviously definitions. Falmata raised the point that even though the conflict within Borno State has been going on for 10 years, it was only until last year that she had even heard of what the HDP Nexus is or can be. And so there is a need for very strong coordination, but it needs to really be centralized somewhere. There's no single strong agency sort of driving it or organization driving it. And so we had a conversation in our group about whether or not that could be local governments, whether or not that could be a collaboration between local governments and international partners, so that there's some continuity and a singular focus point on terms of how progress is being made along the HDP Nexus. I think like worth noting is the accountability of governments was brought up, the saliency of the dollar was brought up, and how international actors have access to it, and how can we use one to sort of balance the other, right? Solve issues of accountability at the local government, but also solve issues of power, or let me say resource sharing on the international side of things, right? And using one to maybe reconcile the other, which I thought was an interesting sort of connection between our international contributions and our local contributions. But ultimately, we need a plan. The management of the transition starts from the outset. I think development actors are quite good at having a plan, but it's about having a plan from the very beginning, from the humanitarian part of the Nexus, if you would. But understanding also, Falmata was sharing that, you know, they're well into planning processes within Maiduguri, but conflict and clashes are happening as recently as yesterday. And so it's not a linear transition. And if we think that we can balance a linear transition, then we're ignoring the reality of some of these contexts and the reality that they face every day. So it's definitely a challenge, but I think the centrality of coordination, connecting our work to plans, involving diversity of stakeholders is something that we have to keep at the forefront, regardless of the urgency of the moment. I'll stop there. And thank you all who are in my group for your contributions.
Well, I think there were quite some same findings, you know, obviously in the development group as in the peace group, because you also said, I mean, you know, as long as there is no peace, as long as conflict is ongoing, any sort of development as well as humanitarian action is really difficult, because that's what we're also noticing in some contexts where humanitarian actors won't even enter into, well, a conflict zone because of ongoing conflicts. And then, of course, needs of people are not met, which in some contexts lead to exactly the phenomenon that we're actually seeing now, that many displaced people actually move to urban areas because they're safer and because aid is available. So yeah, I think I'm very happy with this session, and thanks to all of you who stayed along. Thanks a lot, Owen, for really the preparations that you did. Great job. And thanks also for the good coordination, Sama, and thanks to all the participants. Maybe, Sama, you would like to say some closing words, but from our side, UN Habitat, thank you very much for your interest. I think there are some very interesting tools and documents on our websites. Some of them I put in the chat. And if there's any need, I think you can also, please don't worry, you can reach out to UN Habitat colleagues, including me. So stephanie.luz@un.org. I think I've also put that in the chat if needed. If there are any questions, but yeah, over to Sama for the for closing words from your side. Thanks very much.
No, yeah, I won't keep anybody longer. I put my email in the chat for those that want to reach out. Happy to collaborate again in elevating local leadership on the HDP Nexus. And thank you all for staying late. We really appreciate your time.